Hey, this is Joey, and before I upload my 5 tips for people trying to get themselves together and my masterclass on the various mentalism issues, I wanted to address the spiritual principles behind the 12 steps real quick. And the reason being is Bill Wilson created an incredible concept. Um, the 12 steps, as we know them, are a way to simplify the process of spiritual growth and the just renewal of someone's spirit. Um, there are 12 steps, and they're in order for a reason. But you see, the most important thing I have observed through the years, using my inductive reasoning, which is looking at patterns and drawing a conclusion, which is a lot of how I teach and a lot of how I do things myself, is, it's easier to show you a pattern and see if you can draw out the kernel. But it's the 12 spiritual principles behind the steps. Those 12 spiritual principles are the baseline for the spiritual growth encouraged by all the major world religions when they're not trying to kill each other or handle snakes or sell flowers at the airport. Everyone wants that inner peace. We want it so bad that we look for someone that appears to have it. And all they've got to do is surface sheen it. And we're in. And before you know it, our heads are shaved. We're selling flowers in the airport. We're handling snakes in the mountains, or we're strapping dynamite to our chest because we believe, because it renewed our spirit, gets in touch. Well, because in America we have the separation of church and state, the government flexes a lot of power that used to be flexed by the church. For instance, the marriage license deal. Churches used to take care of that because that was a sacrament in the church. And it wasn't really until the Great Depression and the advent of the Social Security program and the Social Security check that you see the government getting into the marriage business. And the reason why is because when Mr. Smith died after 1936, he was going to get him a Social Security check from his survivor's work. Can you imagine how many Mrs. Smiths showed up with the family Bible to say that her dearly departed husband want her to have that check? Oh my, there were quite a few, I imagine. And so basically the high-level administrators of the government, the ones that were handling the checks, were like, oh, no. So what we're going to do here is we're going to give you an incentive that you would otherwise be adverse to. There's actually a word for that, but it's whenever you don't want to do something, but they pay you just enough to overcome that bad feeling and don't want to do it. Stimulus check issuance is one of those things in another parlance. But anyway, so what you've got is the government saying, if you want these checks, you'll marry through us. We will license the marriage. It doesn't matter what the church says. It doesn't matter what the church does. Separation of church and state. If you want a check, you'll get a license from us. You'll go through our hoops. And wham, bam, Bob's your uncle. Next thing you know, the churches seem to be out of the marriage business. 2-3 generations down, we don't even remember these things. And there's not going to be a whole lot of academic studies on it. There's not going to be a whole lot of records on it because it was a cultural thing. It was a community thing. It was a social thing. Charity was also handled by the churches. Similarly, birth records and stuff like that. All the things now that our government is handling in the name of equal protection of the laws, which is leading us to normalize pedophilia, which I'm completely against, which has already led us to the normalization of same-sex marriages. Now, I have nothing against that. Many friends that are gay. I'm not myself. But it doesn't bother me. I have no innate lingering feelings of homosexuality that I haven't addressed. I'm just not. And, you know, but the straight people aren't wanting to get married. The gay people are because they want those rights, those protections. A country that doesn't believe in God anymore doesn't go to the church to get married. They go to the government to get benefit checks. That's what it's about. But sufficient to say that the government even went up to that. The government has incorporated this 12-step program, the judiciary specifically, in order to rehabilitate the low-level criminals, the people that are addicted to the vices, the addicts, the scofflaws, the anger management people, all those things, they all end up in a 12-step program. Many of our therapeutic treatments nowadays are based in a 12-step program. The Catholic Church has had a quasi 12-step program for a long time, centered on the confession. How do I know this? Because I've been involved in 12-step programs and counseling and the law and the judiciary and writing laws and interpreting laws and doing all this shit for about 30 years. And I was one of the guys that always wrote the loophole for people like me. That's just the way the world works. But through it all, I noticed this. The judiciary has co-opted the 12 steps. It's sort of a secular religion now, these 12-step programs. And they believe it. But what you're supposed to get out of these 12-step programs is some knowledge of the spiritual principles. The spiritual principles that, if followed over time, will lead to a spiritual growth, which will lead to a fundamental change within a person. Because not everybody gets the lightning experience, the sudden conversion. Nobody gets a burning bush unless God's got a plan for them. But you can have an educational conversion. You can have growth. You can become a different person over such a long length of time that you don't even notice it, but everyone else does. So let's go real quick. I'm going to talk to you about the spiritual principles behind the 12 steps. The first one is honesty. We admitted to ourselves and to others their lives was unmanageable. Now then, honesty. We admitted to ourselves and others their lives were unmanageable. This is a generic version. There's Overeaters Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Sexaholics Anonymous, Tinker Toy Anonymous, Star Wars Anonymous. If it can be anonymous, there is one. And not all of them wear the Guy Fawkes mask. But anyway, so the honesty that the first step is talking about is not cash register honesty. You can have a CPA that is cash register honest all day long, and this person will not be spiritually honest. The honesty that we're referring to in the first step is self-honesty, internal honesty, the ability to admit to yourself the real truth of what's going on. Your life is shattered, you're fucked up, you obviously cannot run it right now because you're confused, you don't know, you're out of resources. Life happens and we get panicky. And the more we fight or flight, the more we fidget, the less we are able to make cogent decisions. And the more likely we are to compromise our morals, our integrity, and our ethics. And once you start down the 5-finger discount path, it is so easy to roll down that hill. Once you start in the porn business, it's so easy to sell your soul. Once you begin to have unacknowledged feelings of worthlessness and shame and humiliation, that's it, it's over. But if you can catch yourself and you can admit, like I admit to myself, I am a dope smoking, pill popping, whore hopping, liquor drinking, sorry motherfucker, and I've got to have help to be better because I don't want to be better. I met my birth mother several years ago, about a decade ago. I was adopted, and what I saw in her was what I was going to be one day if my actions were unchecked. So I had to do something different. So I found somebody I could trust, and that's the next step. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. This, my friends, is hope. The step does not talk about God. It talks about a higher power. And when you're trying to get yourself together, when you're trying to find the hope that you need after the self-honesty that says you just can't do it on your own, that hope is embodied in anything other than you that you can place your faith in. Faith. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Faith is the spiritual principle behind the third step. Honesty, hope, and faith. But see, the thing is you can be honest all day long that you're an addict, that you're a thief, that you're a killer, that you're a Karen, a cow, it doesn't matter. If you don't want to do nothing about it, or you don't think it can ever get any better, you'll never get to the second step. And it's always bothered me when people talk about working the first step. You have to work that perfectly every day. Dude, I can admit that I'm a piece of shit and choose not to seek the toilet paper because I like the shittiness. I actually have to believe in something. I have to have something held up to me, an example that I believe can help someone like me. That's what gives me the hope. And then I make a decision to do something about it. So that means I put my faith in that solution and I try to do it. And that leads us to the next spiritual principle, the fourth step. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. I think that was it. I'm doing this completely from scratch with no notes, really. Because I've done it a lot. Because I know these things in my bones. The fourth step has a spiritual principle behind it of courage. We took our faith. We're going to have the courage to do something about it. We're going to take a moral inventory. A moral inventory is not a life story. A moral inventory is where you sit down and you identify those feelings of just angst. You put a label on them. Who in your past has messed with you and who have you messed with? What did it implicate? Most of the time, it's going to be feelings of sex inferiority. It's going to be, that's impotence, I guess. It's going to be anger, agitation. It's going to be fear. All the time. Your moral inventory is going to be a list of how often do you react to other people out of fear, envy, anger, and agitation. And how does the other person's fear, anger, envy, and agitation affect you? Because what you want to do is you want to see a pattern. You want to see how when you're agitated, when you're angry, when you're upset or whatever, you go inside. You go inside yourself. This is the courage. It takes a lot of courage to look at yourself in an unvarnished view because some of us have had sexual abuse, some of us have had other trauma that we don't want to deal with. Some of us have committed crimes for which there is no statute of limitations, and we're just not really wanting to face that again because you didn't want to do it the first time. But hey, shit happens. People fall down at the river all the time and bust their head on a rock. I mean, they're drunk. They're drunk. And so that's that. But that's the courage to look at that. There's worksheets that you can get for fourth step. Do not write a life story. That is really, 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 because first of all, you're going to lie. When you write a life story out, you're going to be the hero of your story and you're going to gloss it. You weren't unnecessarily apathetic towards certain tasks. You were feeling oppressed because the man was fucking with you. Both of those can really mean the same thing depending on the circumstances. So you don't want a life story. Life story comes later. Now, you do want to, on the fifth step, you got to share that with someone. I can't think of what the fifth step said. Fifth step. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Again, this is not my story. Some people choose to do this with a professional. Some people do it with a sponsor. Some people feel like they're just so unique that they can't do it with anybody around. But I assure you that in 30 years of dealing with the dregs of humanity as well as the ivory towers, most people have the same story. Everybody goes through pretty much a variant of the same circumstance at some point in their life. It's almost like God separated himself from himself so he could experience himself in every variation possible of every stub toe, every hit finger. Um, oh, and by the way, that quote comes from Conversations with God. If you haven't read that book, it's a really good book. But yeah, you want to sit down and you want to share with somebody. You want to let them know, man, I'm full of fear, I'm full of anger, and I'm full of shame. I feel fear. And they're going to help you work through it. They're going to help you see, well, yeah, that might be the other person's fault, but, you know, just like being the good son, it doesn't matter what the parent did. You have a duty independent of a bad parent to be a good son. You have a duty as a recovering person to not react to the bait that the world sets out for you. Because if you can fire up strong emotions, you can easily be led from strong emotions, righteous anger, to strong emotions, that bitch left me, to strong emotions, let's get drunk, this or another. It's real simple. You elevate the emotional state, you transfer the factual recollection, and then you push down a hill. And it cannot not happen, actually. So what we learn in the program is actually to pause when agitated. We learn how to reset our internal default clock from fight or flight to curiosity, and it'll allow us to pause. Now, I say fight or flight because the physiological feeling that one has when you're feeling afraid, just like when you're feeling a whole bunch of courage, it's the same feeling in your body. It's the exact same feeling. It's the exact same muscles involved. It's the exact same dopamine drops involved. It's the exact same adrenaline rush involved. The only difference between quaking in a corner and boldly rushing out to face it is your perception. And that's where actually the 7 universal laws of the Hermetic tradition comes in, but that's not what we're talking about right here. So you got somebody, you talk to them, they agree, they don't sign off on your bullshit, you're not telling them your life story. But then we move to the next spiritual principle, which is going to be integrity. Integrity is the 5th step spiritual principle because you got to have the integrity to be honest with another person. You got to have the integrity to keep your shit together, to be wholesome, to be put together properly. Because the next thing you're going to do is you're going to focus on some willingness, the 6th step. The 6th step. Became entirely ready to have these defects of character removed. We want to be ready to stop acting in fear. We want to be ready to stop acting on an agitated impulse. Because when we became entirely ready to have these defects of character removed, we will humbly ask our Creator, our higher power, God as we understand Him, to remove these defects of character, to remove our shortcomings. Now then, check this out. A lot of you out there are agnostic or atheist, and you think the universe is a big machine, a big complicated machine. You know what? A machine can be so complicated that it's just a small for it to become alive. So what's the problem with acknowledging that the universe can be alive and vibrant? And if it's alive and vibrant, then everything within it is working in harmony, because that's what happens in both complex machines and simple organisms. So we can be the universe can be a complex machine, which means this is the most machiney it's going to get, or it can be a very simple organism, which means there's so much room to growth. I myself and my perceptions through my lifetime and then this incarnation is that if the universe is alive, then it can respond and I can have a relationship with it. I can have a give or take. It can talk to me like I can talk to it. And when you get into that, you see synchronicities and other things that we have available to confirm this. Now, if it's a machine, then fuck, I'll go buy a clock. I can't have a relationship with a clock. All a clock can do is tell me what to do. So, in order to save your ass, pretend, if you're atheist or agnostic, that the universe is alive. The great I am exists. And the funny thing about it is if it's infinite, it cannot recognize its infiniteness, because upon recognizing itself as an individual, it loses its infiniteness, and it becomes finite. It becomes a boundary. When it becomes aware of itself, it no longer is infinite. But it also exists out of time and space. So that means all of it exists everywhere, right now, here. The everlasting now, the eternal here. And that's really important, because when we ask this organism, when we ask this universe that we're building a relationship with, this living organism, help us, it will. It will. It'll communicate back with us. Now, how do we know this? Because the seventh step is humility. We realize that we are not the biggest and the baddest in the pond. We become humble enough to acknowledge that there's something outside of us. Human beings and their bioorganic brains and computers, by the way, can be networked just like an electromechanical network can happen. And if you're really agnostic and want to look at it that way, it's a correspondence, which is an example of the second immutable law. Anyway, humility, the seventh step. Now then, we became willing. What was it? We made a list of all persons we had harmed. We became willing to make amends to them all. Forgiveness. We've got to be able to forgive. After humility, we have to work on forgiveness. That's the spiritual principle behind the eighth step. And that leads us to the hardest thing of all, one of the most misunderstood steps, which is the ninth step. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would harm them or others. And I today am an other. I'm a valuable human thing. I'm an other for purposes of this step. I don't have to do something that's going to harm myself. Some amends I can never make. So I pay it forward. Some amends don't need to make because it's going to open up old wounds. And not everybody is trying to fix things. But as a matter of fact, when you mature properly through the growth of the spiritual principles, you don't jump the gun. It's okay. Time takes time. But this is atonement. We atone for our wrongs. We pay the sweat tax. We pay in blood, sweat, and tears. So, man, that's like all but the last three spiritual principles. These last three are the most important. The 10th step is continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. This is discipline. The discipline of doing things over and over. And one of the things that led us to addiction, that led us to our chaos, is we allowed our appetites and desires to override our duties and obligations. Let me say that again. We allowed our appetites and desires to override our duties and obligations. We lost our discipline in the chaos. So every night before you go to bed, take that inventory, run through your day. I actually do it on the spot nowadays. When I hear someone talking about a guy or a girl being a dickhead, an asshole, or whatever, I immediately look into myself and check my behavior and say, man, have I done something that could be interpreted like that? And if so, I immediately try to forgive me, stuff like that. Now, sometimes I can be an ass, and it's just that's going to happen. I don't really give a shit because I might be right, or at least I'm not wrong. Let's put it that way. After discipline, however, it's kind of funny because what I just said leads into the very next thing. Awareness. Oh, Lord. Continue to take personal control over the wrong problem. Admitted it. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him. The 11th step. Awareness. Awareness of the thrum, our place in the universe, our connection. You guys sitting out there, you think that you're different than me. You're not. You're not separate from me at all. You're me in another form. You're an alter ego of the differentiated spirit that I am. Or if you would like, we're all little nodes of spirit concentrate connected to each other through cords of compassion, communication, and a bioelectric magnetic pulse that just thrums in between all living things. Um, I can see it sometimes with aura. You can also tell this is why you want to decalcify your pineal gland. Your pineal gland can become calcified, which is calcium is actually a metal. It's a oh shoot, it's up there with chlorine and potassium and stuff like that. Halide. It's a halide. It's a halide metal, very reactive. But anyway, so it's drawn to the little magnetic field which your pineal gland gives off. Your pineal gland is the equivalent of organic Wi-Fi transmitter. It transmits and receives the human signals, man. Guaranteed, because the principle of correspondence, the second immutable law of the Hermetic tradition, says it must be so, and it cannot be proved otherwise. And using that assumption, you can carry on experiments, you can build upon that, and things have yet to break that were built upon the assumption, the inductive conclusion. So the organic Wi-Fi transmitter puts us in touch, baby. But when it's sealed up, when it's calcified, when we're not paying attention to it, when it's numbed out, we feel isolated and alone. What I like is the spiritual experiences that I sometimes have. They used to call it the mystic's ecstasy, the communion with God. When I can let go of myself and my individual ego and my concerns, and I can feel the life thrumming around me, and I let myself go until I almost lose myself, and I can feel everything is like I'm lost, but I maintain just enough of myself to come back from it. Oh, it's ecstasy. It's the touching of God. I don't even know how to explain it right now. It's what you chase when you seek to have spiritual experiences. And it's awesome. And you know what else it does? Because we realize that you are me in a different form, that everyone hurts, everyone's motivated out of pain or fear when they do stupid shit. Teaches me to love. And I can be of service by trying to help these people out. And that is the 12th step. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we continue. Exhale, exhale, exhale. Carry the message. Service is the 12th spiritual principle. Service in this case is another word for love. And did you know that hate is not the opposite of love? This is very important. The opposite of love is apathy, because love is service. Love is a verb. When we no longer love something, we are apathetic to it. We don't care. We're indifferent. Hate is a function of pride. You can only hate something that has hurt your ego, that has damaged your individuality, your standing as a human being, your self image as a human being. But anyway, this has went on far longer than I thought. But what it is it is the reason why the court system took God out of its religion being 12-step programs. The 12 steps of the anonymous programs founded by Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob. Honesty, hope, faith, courage, integrity, willingness, humility, forgiveness, atonement, discipline, awareness, and service. These are the 12 spiritual principles that, if worked in one's life, if given over, practice these principles in all your affairs. After a while, you no longer have to think about it. It becomes ingrained. And when something becomes ingrained, your body puts it into autopilot. That's how hypnosis can fix things. I'm a clinical hypnotist, a hypnotherapist, as well as lawyer, scientist, and all of that. So I've seen it happen. You reprogram the brain by getting into the subconscious, pulling what's in there out, and putting something else in that's healthier. Most of our habits that are heuristics in our brains and bodies right now. Were very good when we first got it. And I'll oftentimes address someone like this when I have them in the hypnotic state. Body, what you did was very, very good. You protected this person, you protected that psyche like you should by making these things autopilot defensive measures. But those days of service are no longer. Body, now it's time to replace them with healthy habits. What was once a defensive mechanism that worked has now become a cancerous disease that is killing the both of you. Body, once the spirit tastes mortality, you, being the dust of the earth, lose your animation in life. Body, it's in your best interest to replace these bad habits with the good habits. It doesn't matter whether it's originated from you and you let them know by internalizing it, or they give it to you and feed it to you so you can internalize it. It doesn't matter which way it's going to happen. That's the way it's going to happen. You're going to internalize it. Body, you must do this in your self-interest. You must pilot the ship in this regard. Body, you must shut the pain and the cravings away. Body, thank you for what you've done so far. But now it's time to get some new ideas. And basically that's what I do. And it's very successful in a lot of people. And it oftentimes doesn't take very long. As a matter of fact, I will guarantee you that there are a lot of you out there that are going to find it a little easier having listened to this, because I just embedded that. And you know how I know that you will? Because I want you to do something for me even while I'm not there. I want you to picture a nice yellow plump lemon that's been in the freezer. I want you to picture in your mind's eye, I want you to take that lemon out of that freezer, put it on a slab in your kitchen or wherever you cut stuff out, pull out a knife. I don't care what the knife looks like, it doesn't matter. In your mind, take the lemon out, put it on the counter, get a knife, and I want you to cut that lemon open and feel the squirt. You know how the rind does that? Now I want you to take some sugar, salt, whichever you prefer. I do sugar. I want you to sprinkle it on that half a lemon. I want you to take a big bite out of it. That nice cold lemon. Ladies and gentlemen, if you tasted the lemon, if your mouth got watering, if the little of saliva just sprayed in your mouth, you have had your subconscious reprogrammed for the good today. Because you know that there's really not a lemon, but you tasted it. Your body reacted to the lemon as if it was there because you could visualize it. You wanted to do it. You took positive steps to crank your body up. That's the same thing I did, except with an easing of addiction, with an easing of some of your problems. Those were the 12 spiritual principles behind the 12 steps of recovery. This is a way that can hopefully help you understand it a little bit better and give you a different way to work on it. And I'm sorry I had to slip in some help you out in this by throwing in an embedded command that's going to help your body know what to do to make you better. My name is Joey South. I have a doctor of law from the University of Georgia School of Law. I did postdoctoral work as a clinical hypnotist. I'm a licensed, registered, certified hypnotherapist. I was given a commission a long time ago by a gentleman named Roger Rouse to walk the world and be an angel unaware to give people one real chance. Thank you for your time if you've gone this far.